And we're live. Welcome everyone to this session of Dare to Scale, why you should go international in 2021. And I am really pleased to have a fantastic panel here to discuss what I hope will be a kind of quite gritty, and detailed session on sort of really what you can do about if you're planning to take your startup international, scale it up, even in these difficult times. I think it's fair to say that, it's been an extraordinarily difficult year, but it really hasn't seemed to stop startups. And we have two startups here who've both opened, international offices this year. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. But they've had to deal with all of those issues around kind of onboarding a team that they've never met, raising money during a time when you can't get your a face-to-face meeting with your investors. We also have an investor who is doing that from the other side, and someone on the headhunting side who can really give us some good pointers about how to build that team. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have two sessions. One is going to be talking about kind of funding and that side of things, and the other is going to go much deeper into the building a team side of it. We will also allow for Q&A, and we'll cover this at the end of each session. So please, if you have any questions, use the question tab, put those questions in, and we will definitely try to address them. Before I go any further, though, I think I'd like to turn for a moment to Paula and Thomas, who can talk a little bit about the kind of context for this session that's brought to us by Choose Paris region.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Paula. I'm the events manager at Hello Tomorrow. We're delighted to host this webinar with the Choose Paris region. And the topic we are tackling today is at the heart of what we want to do with the core. That is to share every month best practices and valuable content to our startup community. So don't hesitate to register to our newsletter, The Core for Startups. I'll share the link in the chat tab. So you can get access to this content for free. And thank you again for being here today. And thank you for our speakers and for Choose Paris region for this session. We hope you'll enjoy it. And I leave the floor to Thomas, who is the representative at Choose Paris region.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Maija. And many thanks to Hello Tomorrow for setting up this exciting session. I'm in charge of the deep tech industry practice at Choose Paris region. Choose Paris region is the deep tech, is the economic development agency of the Paris region. We support any international company willing to set up their business in Europe and, of course, especially in France. We provide all the resources you need to accelerate your business in France, from initial decision-making to setting up your French entity and every step in between. And since we are a government agency, our services are free of charge. So what are we talking about? That can be market insights, connections to the ecosystem via our partners, legal support through our network of experts, help on your recruitment and finding R&D lab, and so much more. So feel free to reach out to our global team as soon as you dare to scale in France. I'll be happy to answer your questions at the end of the two panel sessions.
Thanks, Thomas. We're going to have a little bit more time actually to quiz Thomas more specifically about what Choose Paris region is doing and some of the kind of initiatives that are coming out. So we'll get to that at the end of the session. And so yes, if you have a specific question for Thomas, please put it into the chat or into the question tab rather, and then we can ask those. But I think this would be probably a good moment for us to all to introduce ourselves. And I apologize because I didn't do that at the beginning. So I'm Maija Palmer from Sifted, which is the media site covering European technology. Some of you may know that. And I write a lot about deep tech and have been following really, the developments that have really accelerated in this field in the past year. And there are some really good examples of exactly what I'm talking about in this panel. So I think without further ado, maybe go to the panelists and just going across sort of in the order that you appear on my screen, maybe start with Sebastian and then going to Leonardo and Sarah and Jan to introduce yourselves. tell us a little bit about also what your company does.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sebastian Groh. I'm the head of strategy and marketing at Excel. Excel is a clinical stage startup from Singapore that has found a new way of detecting early stage cancers in a small blood sample. We achieve that by combining a new rare cell detection technology with a powerful deep learning AI, creating an integrated ecosystem spanning from deep tech all the way through to digital health. That way we can detect a single cancer cell among 5 billion healthy blood cells in a way that is accessible, affordable, and easy to scale. We've just opened our first office in Europe, and I'm excited to be here today and share our experiences.
Great, thanks, Sebastian. And Leonardo, I think you're in a similar situation in the sense that you've also opened international offices, but tell us what you do.
Exactly. So thanks for inviting me today. I'm really happy and actually connecting from Santiago, Chile. So we have a couple of hours difference. And my name is Leo. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Protera. And the core technology that we have developed, it's an artificial intelligence platform, specifically deep learning, that allows us to identify and design new functional proteins for food applications. So we have a multidisciplinary team that goes from artificial intelligence engineers to computational biologists to protein fermentation and production. So because of that, we had to expand our operations globally. We have recently opened an office and a lab facility in France, in Europe. So and we did that through 2020. That was a really complex year. So yeah, I'm happy to talk more about that today.
That's great. And Sarah, you're on the sort of the other side of this as an investor in quite a number of companies.
Yes. Hello, everyone. And also thank you for inviting me today. I'm really happy to be here. So my name is Sarah. I'm part of the investment team of BGV. BGV is an early stage investor based in the Silicon Valley. And we have offices in Paris, in Tel Aviv, and also in India. I'm calling you today from Paris. We are investing at the early stage, so mainly at the seed Series A stage. Our focus is enterprise software and especially what we call enterprise 4.0, so a new generation of enterprise software that are using AI, computer vision, voice technology to disrupt the enterprise world. And we are looking especially at the cloud native security solution, at the solution around the cloud, and also all the AI vertical solution. And another specificity of our fund is that we are 100% focused on cross-border investment. So we're investing in companies that are conceived outside the US. And our goal is to help them expand globally, and especially in the US, as most of our team is there.
Okay, so this international scaling concept, you're a real expert in. So I can't wait to hear a little bit more about that. And then finally, Jan, who is our expert in sort of team building, or hiring your ideal team. But tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah,
exactly.
I prepared the slide so people can read what I'm speaking. My background is in building tech and digital companies and scaling them internationally. That was, let's say, originally what I did. 15 years ago, I decided to offer my services as a country manager for foreign internet companies willing to enter the French market. I rapidly saw that there was a big opportunity in offering this country management services on demand. And therefore, I created a headhunting firm dedicated to scaling tech and digital companies. Since then, we did many placements, interim or full-time. And a couple of years ago, we decided to pivot Mutual Benefits into a purpose-driven headhunting firm, meaning we value and work with companies and candidates looking for people, planet, profit. Hello Tomorrow asked me what trends I see in international scaling of companies, both on the startup side and executive candidate side. So I would share that with you in the second part of this panel at 5:30, and I am very honored to attend. I make myself available for one-to-one on this topic, and can reach me at jan@mutualbenefits.net. I can type it on the side chat. So Thank you very much for welcoming me.
No, well, thank you very much, Jan. And I know from having the sort of preliminary chat with you that you do have some interesting insights on kind of the trends that we're seeing. So I can't wait to dive into those. So we're going to have to say goodbye to Jan for just a little bit while we discuss the sort of fundraising and those issues. But then we'll definitely come back to the sort of hiring side of this question.
I will listen.
All right, we'll see you shortly, Jan. So our kind of the first session is really about sort of unlocking new ways of funding international development in the current situation. And I'm sure we're all sick of hearing that, we're living in unprecedented times. But it just doesn't seem to have stopped many companies from kind of growing and developing. And so I just kind of wanted to start with a really general question, actually, and I'll start with Sebastian and Leonardo in terms of, like, did this feel like this was a good moment to go, to expand and go international? I mean, maybe starting with you, Sebastian, but, did you do it despite the pandemic? Did that kind of slow you down at all, or did you just kind of carry on as you would have?
That's a good question. I think in the big scheme of things, it brought forward a lot of critical strategic steps that we had on the list for 2021, because we early on in the pandemic, we saw ourselves confronted with being, I guess, in lockdown in Singapore, and we made a very, I guess, conscious choice to split up our leadership team across different continents, so we would have the original sort of founding team accessible in various places of the world and have that kind of, I guess, anchor point to sort of represent our values and our purpose and our vision in all parts of the world. So we made that decision very early on. And me having a German background, I was kind of thrust into the European market. And so just one thing came to another. So for us, it was really a question of, I guess, executing on strategy and kind of trying to maintain as much momentum as possible. It was daunting, I would say, in the big scheme of things, but we did draw on a strategic framework and a long-term plan that we formed a couple of years ago, and we're able to sort of build on culture and values that we've also defined a long time ago. So we had a kind of a good springboard, a good foundation to build on that.
So you were, in effect, you were sort of forced to go international maybe earlier because the difficulty in moving around meant that, in order to be able to sort of access certain markets, you just wanted to have a presence there sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, by design, we're an international company. So we have an R&D center in Bangkok, Thailand. We have a laboratory in Singapore, and we have an international staff from various parts of the world. So for us, it made sense to staff the international R&D center with a leadership person to be in charge there. It made sense to have someone in the lab in Singapore, and it also made sense to have someone in Europe, which was going to be our core focus market for the next year or two. And because everything was so volatile and unpredictable, it was clear for us that we had to kind of cover the ground there and be sure that as we're building the company, there would be someone to draw upon and someone to, I guess, take the lead proactively and potentially even be able to provide sort of personal support wherever that's possible with the current restrictions.
Yeah. And Leonardo, was this similar to your situation? Because again, you opened this lab in France, research facility. Was that sooner than you would have planned, or did you do it, just still in the same schedule and you kept going despite the pandemic?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I think from my vision, and when it's the right timing for a startup to scale, there is always a risk, right? Besides the pandemic, there is always a risk to scale up. So I think that's always an issue for companies. I agree with Sebastian that strategy, it's really important for us. It was similar. We started drafting our strategy to relocate the company and core assets to Europe before the pandemic situation, like early 2019, I would say. So then by 2020, in March, we just managed to close our Series A. and just in time when lockdown started, globally. But by then we already had a strategy, so we said, okay, we need to really look at the strategy and really focus on things that will add value to the company. And one of those main or core points were to expand the team, because we were lacking some expertise in our team in Chile and in US, and that was all about finding people with fermentation skills or with leadership skills around our industry. So I think a lot of our reasoning was about strategy, or was driving by our strategy, and also with a lot of help of our investors, right? that helped us to do the soft landing in France, and that's really important when you make the decision. And also another important point for us was the availability of funding, and because we knew that with the pandemic, fundraising it was going to be a big part of the discussion, like investors will invest in this situation. So we thought, okay, in Europe, especially in France, we have a lot of access to grants, and that was another good reason for us to relocate there.
So that's really interesting. So because you were lucky, because you'd just secured this funding just before the pandemic sort of shut everything down for a few months, but then you were already at that point thinking, well, if we need additional funding, we need to be somewhere where we can maybe get some different types of sources of fundings.
Exactly. As a good startup, you're always thinking about fundraising. I think that's one of the main focuses.
Yes. Okay, so it sounds like, and Europe felt like it was going to be the easiest place maybe to be able to access kind of a reasonably rich pool of grants and so on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is a lot of input from the government in France, so that's something that was interesting for us. Still, in US by then, investment was. I will say, rising funds, it's always difficult. Right? It's never easy, but I think it's you can find more VCs that are willing to invest in early stages, pre-revenue companies in the US compared to Europe. I think that it's changing right now, but yeah, we consider that too.
Okay, and it would be great actually to bring Sarah in at this point. I mean, what are you sort of advising with your many portfolio companies in terms of when you've looked in the past year about, are you still pushing them to go international at the same pace, or do you think that there are some where you've had to think really hard about whether this is the right time?
So yes, I think it depends on which stage you are. I think there is some advantage. For example, if you are at the discovery phase, when you are looking at a new market, an advantage with the pandemic is that you can leverage all the international events that are now digital and that you couldn't join before the pandemic. So this is a positive thing. And also, I think with the pandemic, more and more companies are buying solution remotely. So it becomes a common practice, or it's in process, I would say. So another advantage is that company can contact potential customer directly, even if they are not there, and try to feel the market and what is the inside feedback that they get from them, and maybe to get some traction in the new market. After that, I still believe that you need to be in the market. So one founder needs to come to the place if we're talking about the US, to reallocate there, or either to recruit someone. And obviously, it becomes more difficult to do back and forth and try to familiarize yourself into this market. And also, like what I think in the US market, it's really important to recruit someone in the sales and marketing, because, for example, as a European person, you cannot sell like an American to American person. And also being there, it builds your credibility, the confidence that you are not like that you are very focused on this market and that they can trust you on that. So I think it's a challenge with the pandemic to recruit, and that's why also we are helping our portfolio company with that. having a right partner, for example, us in the US, to help you recruit, to help you find the right partner is very important. So it can be to find a VC there, but also an advisor or partner. Try to find someone in the market you are trying to expand.
Yeah. And did you find that you were kind of having to do more in a way to help because of this? You know, you have a presence in a lot of different countries, markets, and with, you know, again, with restrictions and so on, and it being more difficult. I just wondered whether you had to put in like extra effort to kind of try to help your startup company sort of, you know, internationalize.
Yeah, sure. So yes, mainly on the recruitment, and also to help them understand also all the challenging to get the visa or to get all these administrative things done. So yes, and also to meet the people. For example, if they are looking for someone in the US, they are going to meet them by Zoom, but us, we will try to meet them face to face. So yes, we have been more active on that.
Yeah, and let me keep you on the, you know, in the spotlight for a moment, because I kind of wanted to turn this to the fundraising aspect, which I think is kind of really top of mind for a lot of startups at the moment. And what I think is really interesting is that we've seen this trend this year where it's been I mean, I remember this time last year we were worried about what was going to happen to VC investment. And in fact, what we saw over the course of the year was a record amount being spent overall, but it kind of shifted in the places that it was being spent. So we saw a lot of bigger, fewer rounds, you know, more being spent, but in fewer rounds. So there were follow-on rounds, bigger rounds, later stage rounds. And given that you focus on the early stage, you know, this is the sort of area where it was the most tricky. So I'm just wondering, like, what did you see overall? Has it been difficult for those kind of Series A's, you know, seed rounds and companies that have been seeking those?
Yes. So actually, for us, we were more active than before last year. So it was a pretty good year. But I would say we have an advantage because we have someone in the local market we are focusing on. So there is someone in France, there is someone in Israel, and there is someone in India. So that's, I think that the main challenge is really to invest in people you cannot meet face to face is always the same challenge. So for VC that cannot meet the entrepreneur at the early stage, and why is it most difficult at the early stage? Because the team is even more important because you don't have a lot of traction, you don't have a lot of financials. So we really invest in a team, and by Zoom it's difficult because it's like very formal. You go directly into the points. There is no space for informal connection. Build personal connection. So it's kind of difficult, and I think it has been one of the challenges. And for the VC that don't have a presence in a local market that they want to invest in, I think they trust a partner. For example, we were close to some other investor, and they will ask us our insight, our feedback after meeting with the entrepreneur, or if we already invest in the company, of course, they will trust our judgment. So yes, I think this is one of the main challenge. And I want to tell maybe a small anecdote to you. You need to be creative to meet the people you want to meet. And for example, we were at the final stage to invest in a startup, and we needed to negotiate the term sheet. And it was at the beginning of they closed the frontier between Switzerland and France, and my partner just traveled from the US to Switzerland, and it was very difficult for him to move to Paris. So at the end, we met at a small coffee at the frontier to discuss all this topic. And I think it's important. It's built even stronger connection between people because it's a very uncommon meeting. So yes, be creative, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So lots of ways and means, but that personal meeting is still super important. I'd love to hear from sort of Sebastian and Leonardo from the entrepreneur side. Like Sebastian, what did you raised money during the pandemic? So how did that work?
Yeah, we raised a C+ round or pre-A, whatever you want to call it. We were lucky in the sense that we had a lot of conversations going already, I think. So we were in the middle of discussions as the pandemic broke out. But I totally have to second what Sarah said, that a huge advantage was that we did take a leap of faith and positioned the founding team across the key markets that we wanted to cover. So essentially, wherever we did want to go into deeper conversations and potentially negotiations, we were able to do that in person, I guess in line with whatever restrictions were in that jurisdiction. And I think that flexibility and that agility really helped us hit the ground running on that front. So it'll be interesting to see what it's going to be like now that we're slowly going into Series A, because as Leonardo said, you never stop raising, right? No,
of course. And as soon as you've raised the first round, you're straight onto the second. So, but what are you doing then? Are there investors that you've only spoken to on Zoom? And are there any kind of tips for how you can make that connection even when it's difficult?
Yeah, it certainly is the case, and it's a huge challenge. But on the other hand, I think we're all under pressure. We're all feeling the stress, and we're all human. And so I think being transparent and just being approachable is the way to go, at least sort of from my personal experience. Ultimately, I think investors, but also staff, customers, gravitate to people who kind of show up authentically. And that has always proven to be a good way, even with this kind of screen culture in between us. But also on a more practical level, I've started to essentially sort of ongoingly DD ourselves. So I've actually started sort of almost preparing a standard questionnaire to investors to ask them, what are the things you're looking for? What are the kind of factors, what are the variables that sort of make your decisions? And based on that, I've kind of developed my own little system to be able to share with investors. And we've developed some interesting, I guess, new media to share and discuss and present that go beyond a pitch deck or something, and that really cater to, I guess, more of a real negotiation that really helped us and that made us, I guess, stand out. Because at the end of the day, you need to find a way to show that you're the real deal and that you're not just any other company that reuses a pitch deck or steals a narrative that has been floating around the internet.
Yeah, and to some extent, you as much as you're trying to appeal to investors, you're also auditioning them, because this is somebody that you will have a long-term relationship with. So do you think you would ever do a deal without meeting them at all in person?
That's a very good question. Never say never, but I'm an optimist, and I think there's always an opportunity to make that happen. I mean, across the founding team, we've all made the sacrifice to be available. So I think now it's just a question of the final mile and making that happen. And hopefully COVID will allow us to, find ways, like Sarah said, to at least have a coffee or feel that personal connection. Yeah. Because ultimately an investment is a long-term relationship that also has to work on a human level, right?
Yeah. And turning to you, Leonardo, similar experiences? I mean, again, you did your big fundraising before everything shut down. So, but I'm assuming that you're already having some, at least preliminary conversations about the next raise. So how's that going, doing that remotely? I mean, are you finding ways around it?
That's true. So we were lucky that we closed just in time. So we had a healthy runway right now, but still looking for future investment rounds. And I think Sarah touched on some really interesting points, and that I like to summarize, because I think it's valuable for entrepreneurs and startups, especially on the seed stage. It seems to me like they need to really focus on local investor that can have potentially in-person meetings. I think that's super important. because getting investors that you have never met in person to invest in an early stage before you have any product market fit or validation of the team, I think it will be difficult. Then on the other side, in companies that have already received investment and some validations, and if you have a big name VC that is backing you up, I think that gives you an opportunity to actually scale, because other investors will be more willing to join a future round where they have a recognizable name backing up the team. So I think it's linked to the first point, right? Like if it's the right moment to scale, I think it depends on where you are. If you have already raised some money and you have some backup, I think it makes sense to do it. And that's exactly what we have seen right now in our fundraising. We are connecting a lot with investors that we have met in the past, like from 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's reconnecting with them, and not just at the investment level, also with potential clients. I think, clients that we have met before once or twice are coming back to us, because then it's more difficult to connect with new startups. So it's easier to structure a deal or something with somebody that at least you have met once. And that's what we have seen. So yeah, but still, struggling with virtual meetings. And one question you have, it's about, will you receive investment from somebody that you have never met in person? It's a challenge that we have today too, right? We have some investors that we have never met. They are interested, and it's everything virtual. I think, at the end, it's from the opportunistic side. You need to take, right, what you have. Otherwise, I would love to definitely meet in person at least.
Yeah. And the one question that we've had is really about sort of scaling. So I'd like to be responsive to that and maybe keep you in the spotlight here, Leonardo. But can you talk us through it all, like how it's been so far in terms of establishing this presence in Europe and France, and any kind of learnings that you could share with others who are sort of thinking about doing? I mean, the same. I mean, has it how's that gone? What have been the sort of big pain points for you in that?
It's a whole new world, right? We have operations in Santiago. We have lab, like 23 team members here, R&D facilities, etc. We are familiar with the law. We're familiar with the corporate culture, with the structure, etc. Then we relocated to San Francisco, and we are part of the Indie Bio accelerator. So they gave us that soft landing, and in reality, incorporating in Delaware, it's like one day thing. It's really easy. And then corporate culture, I think in US, it's way lighter than in Europe, especially in France. So I think getting to familiarize with the law in France, and all the detail from the contracts with the employees are totally different from what we see in US to what you see in France. So you need to learn about that. You need to learn how to incorporate and make sure that everything it's okay. That's being an entire process for us, and we rely a lot on partners. We are connected with investors. They help us a lot to navigate and to show us how other companies have done it in the past in similar situations. So I think we rely a lot on partners in Europe to make it happen.
And how are you finding kind of building your sort of market share, I guess, in a new market? I mean, how's that going?
It's interesting because, and this is just my experience, not sure if it applies to any other industry, but we have seen a growing interest in food, in developing new healthy products and functional ingredients to replace additives. So that's a constant now, and consumers are pushing more and more. So we see a lot of interest from clients. Fortunately, we have clients globally that have interest, right, from South American companies, North American companies in Europe, a lot of food companies there. And the way we work with them, it's the first stage, it's a collaboration where we help them to deploy our ingredients and use our AI platform to improve upon what they have. So that can be done virtually. But then the second half, it's where we face a lot of challenge, which is it's actually about scaling up and manufacturing. With lockdowns and everything, you need to really manage timing. And I think that in that regard, being in Europe and in South America gives us a good timing, because the first wave in Europe, and then we have a lockdown in Europe, but we were open in Chile to go to the lab. Then the opposite happens. So we are in this kind of opposite way.
Yeah.
So that's another opportunity for us.
I love the kind of narrative that's emerging here, which is not, oh, you're sort of scaling and going international despite the pandemic. In fact, actually going international is a strategy to kind of combat some of the difficulties, that you can be, as Sebastian was saying right in the beginning, having a presence in, on 2-3 continents has become actually kind of a survival strategy now, which is, and maybe on that note, turning to you, Sebastian, I was wondering how's it going in terms of kind of building again awareness and market share, in Europe, having made the big move.
It's going surprisingly well. Then again, we are in healthcare, right, which is traditionally not a market that is disruptable in that sense, because it's highly regulated and for a reason, to protect patients. So we're making inroads, but it's obviously a long journey. And what we're realizing really is that every market is different, and every market has their own little hoops to jump through. And that's what we're learning being here. So on a brand building front, I think we're going quite well. Interestingly, a lot of that is also through the few occasions we had the opportunity to meet people in person, and then kind of were able to follow up virtually. But it's a challenge, but we're making good progress. And again, as I said earlier, I think a lot of that also comes down to sort of, I guess, foundations that we've laid in the past that relate to sort of company culture, values, and strategy.
Yeah. And do you think it has helped you to be in the sort of healthcare sector, given that there's such a spotlight on it right now? And even though you're not, developing a COVID vaccine, but you're still, I think we've all kind of understood that we need to really back these medical advances in all sorts of ways. Does that kind of boost things?
Well, there's certainly been a lot of talk in the industry, and there's also some capital flowing in, as you said, not necessarily to early stage, but it's definitely a hot sector, and I do think we benefit from the attention. But there's also, I guess, the downside to that, in the sense that you have to be heard, and you have to find ways to show that you're the real deal. Amid, I guess, the white noise. That's also a side effect of that phenomenon, I guess. But yeah, it has benefited us, I think, and I do hope that it'll last until we close our Series A.
Yeah, right. And Sarah, I know that you will have to leave us in a moment, but I'm just wondering before that, it would be great to hear from you. I mean, what kind of specific scaling advice do you give to companies once you help them make that move? Then what are the things that you sort of are the next steps to focus on?
Yes. So actually, one thing that is very important, and we are coming at this stage, at the early stage, is when you are thinking about expanding a new market and you are doing your own homework. Like, where are my customer? Is the pain point validated into that market as well? Where can I find the top talents? And it's very a preparatory work. That I think it's very important for an entrepreneur. Don't go like this, okay, we're talking about the US, Silicon Valley, so I'm going there. It's not like that. You need to think about all the elements, and it's really depending on the industry, where is your team, which pain point you are solving. So we are really thinking, brainstorming with all our company on all that topics. And after, when you find something, when you think that it's you crack something, we think it's really important that one of the co-founder will relocate. One of the conditions that we are telling them, because I think it's like their baby, and they need to share the vision to a new team. So it's kind of, it depends of. I'm talking about expanding into the US, where it's a huge market. I'm not talking about different. We have less experience in helping our portfolio company to expand into Latin America and other country. But yes, this is definitely something that we think it's important for companies. And after, yes, to start building your team. Keep the R&D in your local market if you are expanding into the US, because it's way less expensive and you have smart talent there. And after, the challenge is to find the right person for the sales and marketing, customer success, because it's important to have the top talents that sing like American and can sell to American and also can brand their company. So yes, it's a full process and full brainstorming session with all our portfolio company.
Now, we're almost at the end of our time, but there was a really good question that came in from Sarah for you, Sarah. It's about how you prioritize what startups to back, because we saw this massive shift. I mean, there was just a kind of a lot of excitement around the sort of healthcare type stuff, which I know is not something that you invest in, but I was just wondering whether you did make any, different prioritization decisions for your portfolio this year.
So actually, it's also based on our expertise and where we can provide more value. So that's how also we prioritize where we want to invest. We're building some investment theses, and we're trying to really follow those theses of where we are investing. So for example, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're really focused on enterprise software, and we are focusing on the vertical AI, so solution that disrupt a specific industry. And we have some expertise in the e-commerce, manufacturing, logistic, and retail space, for example. We have less experience in healthcare yet, but this is something that we're working on, to talk with some experts and to develop an investment thesis also around digital healthcare. So yes, we will typically focus on companies where we can provide them some added value.
Yeah. Okay. So, and it's all around these investment theses, which, did you have to rewrite those theses quite a lot, again, to kind of adjust for pandemic conditions?
The word is evolving. So it's like a very ongoing process.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't want to shortchange the next session, so I think we'll probably have to leave the sort of the fundraising and going international, that part of going international there. But so we'll say a very big thank you, Sarah, and Sebastian and Jan are staying with, or Leonardo are staying with us, and we will welcome Jan to come and tell us the sort of hiring point of view if we turn to that part. So
thank you.
Thanks again, Sarah, and hello, Jan. So stay with us, stay with us to the audience, because we're about to kind of dive into a little bit more about sort of how to hire, when you have to do it remotely. And I have to tell the audience that when we've sort of had a preliminary chat around this hiring remotely emerged as kind of the single biggest headache, I think. I don't know if I'm fair to say that was kind of what everybody had found particularly tricky. So I think it's good to talk about that in more detail. And maybe starting with our two entrepreneurs first, just to kind of give us a little picture. Again, maybe starting with you, Sebastian, like how many people have you hired during the pandemic, and how many of them have you managed to meet in person, if any?
I think we hired 6 or 7 people, 3 leadership staff, and a couple of lab technicians in Thailand. In Thailand, that wasn't a problem because people could come in for interviews and actually work in the labs. With the leadership staff, it's a little bit different. I was able to actually meet 2 of them at the start of last year. One person, our head of sales in Europe, we essentially hired entirely remotely, and I've only met him for actually signing the contract. So that was certainly a challenge. But yeah, so we went, I guess, head on in the hiring process, and we didn't back out just because of the challenges ahead, I guess.
Yeah. And what about you, Leonardo? Again, how many people have you hired, and how many of those were entirely remote?
We have hired a lot of people, especially for our R&D positions in Chile. That wasn't a problem because we were able to meet in person. In Europe, we hire by now 9 positions, and those were all remote. I haven't met, well, except for the first position, the rest I haven't met them in person, not even a single time. So everything it's being remote. We have most of the team is in France. We have 1 person in UK, and people working. We have 3 leadership positions, and the rest is split between the team working on the fermentation side and scaling up part of our process, but also on artificial intelligence. And I think for software, for the team more related to software, it's easier because they have more experience working remotely, and so that hasn't been really a big issue. But still, it's hard to think about ways to improve the alignment in terms of the culture, how we bring everyone together and make sure that we are aiming for the same things, right? And especially when you can't communicate that in person, it's really a challenge.
Yeah, but I seem to remember that you had quite a good tip to share with people, because you had this sort of strategy of hiring a really key anchor person in the territory, and that was kind of how you managed to get around this cultural issue.
Exactly right. So and maybe it's not a strategy we thought from the beginning, it's the way we did it, and it worked really well. So I recommend following something similar. And once we started to thinking about the process of incorporating the company in France and scaling up the team, we thought, okay, we need really somebody with a lot of experience in the area that can help us to manage the entire operations in Europe. So we got a really good connection from one of our investors that had a connection in his network with the experience, with the appropriate experience. So we met with him 2 times actually to get lunch together before we need to fly back. And I will say we got lucky because we were aligned from the beginning, and it's really strange to find that kind of alignment at a core level so easily, right? That's really difficult in a way that we trust him a lot, and that was key for us to then expand to the rest of the team. Yeah. So I think in that the lesson we learned, it's okay, we really need to hire slowly and make sure that we have an onboarding process that it's designed in a way that will allow the new employees to be aligned with the vision, right? The new team members to be aligned with the vision of the company, and that's the most important part for us, and how to replicate the culture and make sure that we don't have completely different cultures of the company working separately. That's really difficult to manage.
So you really have to get this first hire, this anchor person really right, and then you have to trust them a lot, maybe more than you would normally kind of put on a person that early on. Sebastian, does that kind of is that similar to kind of how you've solved things? I mean, I know you're here in Europe yourself, so I guess you've been able to kind of meet more of the hires because of that.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to fill that exact position that Leonardo was talking about, right? To kind of be that multiplier that is able to get people on board with our vision, our values, and be able to take them on the journey to understanding the brand and understanding the spirit that we would like to, I guess, showcase to the world. At Excel, I think our strength has always been coherence on a very fundamental level, with vision, with purpose, with personal values. And that's something that we really wanted to uphold, I guess, and that's one of the reasons I was here. And when we did bring on new staff, we actually made a huge effort logistically with COVID testing and that kind of stuff to be able to bring people together for 3 or 4 days and have a personal workshop and cook meals together and all these kind of things to try to form a bond before we kind of leave them out in the wild, to just to make sure that we create trust, we build trust, and we also set a standard of how we want to communicate going forward, and how we operate as a team.
Yeah, and it would be good to bring you in here, Jan, now to kind of fill us in on the sort of the bigger picture. Like, what are you seeing overall in terms of companies, are they really struggling with this? Have they slowed down their hiring, or are they doing things differently? I mean, what are the patterns you're seeing?
So in startups, I think the main changes in 2020 versus the previous years is that we have 20 of our clients who went fully remote. So not only they are hiring remote, but decided that until the COVID is, everyone is vaccinated, they will, skip the offices and move entirely remote. So I don't know if it's here to stay. Probably not for 20% of our clients, but maybe that will resist. When they go full remote, they organize monthly and gathering offsites, and they bring their PCR test and anti-COVID test, and that works pretty well for building up. And as Sebastian says, cooking together and doing stuff with masks, but still being together, maybe for 2 or 3 days, with all the security barriers and so on, rather than every day at the office. In the hiring, including for C-level, without the physical one-to-one, is now usual, and it's probably here to stay, and leading to a broader adoption of online assessment tools, meaning a more structured approach and more pre-hiring work. I saw some clients and candidates starting working for 1 week because they were not sure yet, if that would really be a huge fit. So you see that. What could be perceived during the interviews is now replaced by more and more online due diligence and business cases and reassurance than before. I think a big trend, and we appreciate that, is more startups are working on their ethical and purpose, and in order to attract the best talents, which are more and more sensitive than before on these issues. I think Sebastian mentioned that, and that's a big trend.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that that's actually something that might turn out to be an upside for startups, in the sense that if we have this general move, I mean, I think in the past year, a lot of people have kind of reassessed all sorts of things about their life, right? And also the purpose for which they would like to work and they want to be, and this idea of wanting to have a purpose. Now, I'm not saying every startup can do this, but there are quite a lot of startups that feel very close to that purpose. They're solving a particular problem for which there is no solution, and therefore and so is that kind of an advantage that you think that startups could really use, if they want to attract people maybe they couldn't get before?
I think every startup can think now how it impacts, people, planet, and profit. What is their triple bottom line strategy? Even if they are not solving a big, let's say, SDG problem, they have in their values something to share with the world. And then I think in order to attract the best talents today, this is critical.
Yeah.
And
so do you think...
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was just wondering whether you were seeing, maybe startups getting people of a caliber that might otherwise not have considered those jobs.
Yeah, what we see is that people are keen to reduce their salaries for more purpose companies. This we see it, and we made a survey about it, and people declare that between 10 and 20% can be cut of their salaries if the company is solving big climate change or biodiversity issues or health issues. So this become an advantage, really also a financial one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Yeah. So sorry, I just wanted to jump in with a quick question for you. Like, have you seen a increasing in turnaround in terms of if you hire the wrong person? Because we are talking here about how in the past we used to meet people face to face, but then even if you do that, you can hire the wrong people for that position, the wrong person. So have you seen an increment in turnaround, or not really during the pandemic? Like it's really difficult to assess, and then it's more challenging, or not?
No, I don't see more, let's say, drop-offs during trial periods. What I see is more time taken before. So instead of a process which usually was like 6 to 8 weeks, we have longer processes now. Because on both sides of the table, both candidates and companies, they want to be reassured that this is the right decision. That's why we see this pre-work, consulting phase, part of the hiring process. Then for the turnover, I think we don't have enough time, but I think there may be some more mobility, but I cannot
Yeah.
give you the facts.
Yeah, I mean, Jan, are you hearing or seeing anything directly where people are getting quite frustrated then in that onboarding phase, because that's so
I think this
difficult
is the
to
most tricky point. I think everything which can be thought in terms of how to welcome someone virtually, and people are sending out the computers to the home of the people. People are considering things like, okay, you are blocked at home and your children needs to be educated, so maybe we understand that maybe you cannot be available after 4 p.m. I think really taking in consideration all the work-life balance related to the COVID times matters a lot.
Yeah. Sebastian, have you come up with any really good ways to do the onboarding and avoid some of those kind of frustration, finding that the wrong person, or maybe it's the right person but they don't feel like they're fitting in? Or
yeah, well, in terms of onboarding, as I said, I think one important thing is to, if restrictions allow, build in some sort of face-to-face time if possible. But then it really comes down. It's a leadership challenge ultimately, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on leadership to be present, to listen, and I guess to communicate very clearly and very decisively. Not communicating in the scenario that we currently live in is just not an option. With every void that you leave, people will start to fill it with their own assumptions. And they will start, I guess, creating their own storyline that might not be there. I like to think for Excel that we benefit just from having a strong narrative backing and a strong storyline, a strong purpose that keeps people focused on the big goal. But nevertheless, it has been an added challenge on the leadership level to be in touch and to be there. And I think also to be vulnerable to a degree, and also share how you're responding to these challenges, and yeah, just to be transparent about the process, about what's going on, about what your goals are, and also to be transparent about the fact that we are in a volatile, ever-evolving situation, and that what is true today might not be true tomorrow, and that this is just a reality that we all have to grapple with. And I think to be as clear and transparent about that as possible, the less or the more context you give on that front, the less guesswork you allow. Yeah. And that really builds coherence across the team for me.
I mean, one interesting thing that I remember you said to me when we were talking before was just how much busier you have been on that communications front. I mean, do you feel like almost the nature of your role had to change dramatically because you became this sort of connector person, really?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm a journalist by trade, so I feel like I've always, like to be a bit also in the position of an information nexus, but I've never been, I guess, more involved in the sort of day-to-day operations and talking to people internationally across time zones than I have been in this period. But it's been a really, I guess, humbling and rewarding experience to be able to connect with your staff on that level, and also to be approached on that level, and to build trust that goes maybe beyond what you would usually share in office. So there's certainly upside to this in terms of team coherence as well.
Yeah. And Leonardo, what about you? Have you felt that your role, your sort of leadership role, had to kind of change to accommodate changing times?
Yeah, I mean, it's always evolving, especially as the co-founder and CEO. My background is in biotech engineering, so I'm a scientist, and then I turn myself into every single position except for finances and operations. That's managed by my co-founder. But yeah, I've been learning a lot about the importance of communications, and that's central to our onboarding process too. We make sure that we are really transparent, and Sebastian mentioned that you need to make sure that the people joining it understands everything, not just the upside, but the risk. And that's something that we put a lot of time to explain and say, okay, we are growing, we are seeing all these opportunities, but you need to make sure that you are also open about the risks. So we always do that. And then some practical, like really practical things that we are doing to improve that. It's to have a better documentation internally. And that's something that we never thought about the importance of it, about documenting the entire process and having everything available for people to just follow one link into Notion and then have everything ready so that they can read through and understand where we are in terms of the projects, the R&D, the objectives, etc. It's being really important, and it's really painful at the beginning because as a startup you don't have everything documented, but then once you have it, it helps you a lot to onboard people and get up to speed more quickly. So I think that's something we've been focusing a lot too.
Yeah. And how do you divide it with your co-founder? Are you more of the communicator, or do you share it equally, or how has that kind of division worked?
So Francia, my co-founder, she's on the operations and part of the strategy and finances, and then I took all the internal communications with clients, and kind of business development, etc. Kind of a bit of everything. But now, as we are onboarding more senior positions and leadership positions, it's being, and I think that's key in terms of our focus. It's how to delegate a lot of that during this process. It's twice as difficult, I would say, because it's always difficult to being a co-founder and then delegate, and then doing that during the pandemic where you can't really meet people face to face. It's really challenging, but it's something that needs to happen, especially if you're scaling up.
Yeah.
I like the good news about this, Maija, about the online networking and online events. What I see since 1 year is that we have a more diverse crowd in online events than we used to have in offline events. I see that in the people attending this event today, we have let's say a good gender balance, and that leads to also, both on the company side and on the candidate side, taking more attention about the diversity in the teams. And I think this is a very positive thing. We see, of course, more gender diversity in tech than we had before. The bro culture is now named and shamed, which is good news. And the gender-free mobility of the workforce and more diverse team, I think, came out of this virtuality or virtualization of both events and online networking. So my advice to anyone is, you spend a lot of time in offline events, spend a lot of time on your LinkedIn account, and make sure that you are communicating the right thing about who you are, what you do, and what you want to do in the future, because this is the main space, both for companies and for candidates, for networking today. And
yeah. And Jan, what do you think? I mean, how much of this do you think will stay? Because I mean, hopefully we're not going to be in the pandemic situation forever. But what bits of the changes that you've seen do you think will carry forward, and what should startups be thinking about, kind of as a permanent feature of how they might kind of hire?
I think since the Me Too revolution happened in society, let's say the Me Too revolution happens in companies now, and that will stay, and that's a fantastic revolution of giving everyone access to companies. What we see with this gender diversity, we see it with other forms of diversity, where we cannot discriminate people based on anything. And I think the virtuality of or the virtualization of work helps this too. The second thing I think is what was a millennial concern about ecology and climate change is now a generation thing, and it's no longer a generation. It's in the times now, because we know that the impact of where COVID is coming from, and we don't want to repeat that longer. I think another interesting trend is which will stay, is that remuneration is no longer based on where you are. We don't see any. I mean, we had like a 20% difference between Paris and the rest of France, and for the C-level executive, there's like 5% difference now. It's really like a minimum. That means that you can really make a better quality of life by living outside of Paris while being paid as much as you would be in Paris. So that's interesting. Yeah, So I told you about the work-life balance too, and the attention we give to education for our children, the attention we must give to our employees about let's say, if they fall into COVID or, so I think everything related to the care will stay.
Yeah. And do you think you will
sorry,
see this?
oh,
no, do jump
just
in.
one quick question on the same line. Like, what about willingness to relocate to other places? Do you think that now people is less willing to relocate, especially within Europe? Have you seen anything there? Any thoughts how it will be in the coming months, years?
You mean people ready to move from their home city or country?
Exactly. Right. We have an office in France, and if you hire somebody from UK, willingness to relocate to France or from Germany, etc.
I think until the travel is banned and so on, it's very hard for people to kind of see the future about moving back or moving to a place. I think during this year, it's better to assume that people will not move from a country to another. When people will be vaccinated, things will change. There is something about on this topic is the tension of expats. There's no more French available in Berlin for working on behalf of French companies. There's no more German available in Paris for working on behalf of German companies. If you want to have someone from your culture, from your nationality, who's opening, let's say, doors or creating a link between your two cultures, that becomes very difficult.
But what? Because those people are already all fully hired, and yeah. Okay, and there's no kind of new supply of them, I suppose, because people are
supply in German-speaking in Paris and French-speaking in
yeah. So I guess the prices. I mean, the price of hiring someone like that then has gone up and up.
That's why the purpose is coming into the place. I mean, your purpose is your negotiation now.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting how it changes, that maybe you used to be able to sort of save a little bit on your hiring bill by looking, outside of, say, the Paris region, but now it might be because, well, you're saving the world and they're maybe willing to take a pay cut for that. I'm curious also, Sebastian and Leonardo, like, how do you feel about, like, if you hire someone who's maybe working remotely at the moment, but would you want them to then eventually be able to relocate? I mean, Leonardo, you asked the question, so I wondered if that was on your mind a little bit.
Yes, I mean, we have faced that situation where we have, especially in leadership positions, that we are not only looking for people within France, but also in Europe in general. And it's been a challenge how to manage that. Right now we're very flexible because it's obvious that we can't force people to travel around. So we're really flexible about where that person will sit, but we make sure that we say, okay, we really need you, that at some point you need to travel, right? And we meet with the team once that's possible. That's the first thing. Then in the future, we don't see our company going 100% remote because it's not possible. First, we have to operate facilities and production, etc., in a lab, so you can't do that remotely yet. Hopefully in the future, but and also people is also looking forward to connect face to face, and it's a discussion we have always internally. Like, people working from home, they want to go to the office at least once or one day or 2 days per week. So I think that's how it will evolve. We will be flexible and make sure that everyone can work from home or work at the office.
So flexible, but I guess there is a desire to move into that situation where people will all be roughly, certainly your regional teams will be sort of in a similar location where it's possible to meet and work together, because that face-to-face time is still important.
Exactly. That's correct.
Sebastian, does that sound similar? I mean, how are you guys thinking about the sort of the remote, office balance?
Yeah, it's hard to predict, right? I certainly believe in the power of people physically meeting and the kind of cross-pollination that happens in these scenarios that we're trying to, I guess, balance as good as possible at the moment. But of course, we're asking ourselves questions as to how important will office space be in the future as compared to the past. But we're in a very similar situation as Leonardo in that we have set laboratory spaces and locations that, for instance, R&D center or a clinical validation center, that are, I guess, set landmarks on our map. And I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll move to a system where people meet more sporadically centrally. In Europe, it certainly seems to be the case at this point. But I think some of the success we had in the last 2 years was also due to us consolidating some key staff in Singapore and bringing them together and having that interaction and having that exchange between people. So I also wouldn't want to lose all that momentum and all that energy, especially as we're talking about culture again, right? So culture starts at the top. So the more you get people together and really breathe how you work, and I guess the passion and the drive that's there as we go about our day to day, the easier it'll be to then scale that internationally and bring it, down the chain across other departments.
Yeah, now it's interesting because I think there's going to be lots of management studies written about this time, because one observation that lots of people have made is that you can kind of go through the day-to-day tactical stuff is fine remotely, even over longer periods of time, but the sort of the strategic kind of what's the bigger picture thinking really starts to suffer, and so companies can't sustain that remoteness for very long without being able to somehow kind of get back together to get the strategic head on.
Yeah.
So
Sarah said an interesting thing earlier. I think a real keyword is homework on all these levels. Like, have you done, as you go internationally, what we discussed in the first session, it's really about just sort of, have you ticked all the boxes, almost regardless of the crisis or not, is there a sound strategy that you're building on? Have you done your homework? Do you have the right talent? Do you have the right leadership? Do you, are you committed to doing this? Are you, have you thought about this financially? Have you thought about this strategically? And I guess once that's in place, and it makes it easier. It's the same thing for people. Have you done your homework? Do you know what you're trying to achieve? Do you know what you want people to say about the company when they're separate in a room, separated from you? For us at Excel, our goal has always been very simple. We want people to have the same experience with each Excel employee, regardless of in which constellation they meet us.
Yeah.
And once you've got the basics covered, I think it becomes easier. And sometimes you do have to, I guess, sort of zoom out and take that bird's eye perspective for that. I think that it's a must. And regardless of if it's remotely or not, sometimes you have to do that offsite and get back to the fundamentals.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to sort of close out the session by going around maybe for any kind of tips, or trying to make this useful for any of the startups that are watching. And I think we've already had like lots of excellent tips, in fact, from all of you. But I just wondered if there was one piece of advice that that you would give. I mean, I'll pick on you first, Leonardo. I mean, you were. I mean, I love that advice about the key person. But what about? Is there anything else that you think you would sort of share as a nugget?
Yeah, I'll again point out to the documentation fact that's really important, and for us it's being really transformational, and just having everything in one place for people everywhere in the world to look into. It's really important, and it helps you a lot on onboarding process, on having materials for your investors, etc. So it serves multiple purposes. And yeah, I think that's one of the key points for hiring. Then for fundraising, if you're a Series C, focus on local investors and try to build on connections that you have made previously. And if you're Series A, Series B, just focus on your network. And I think it's easier if you are going to scale that other investors will jump in because you're already backed up by some big names that support the team, etc.
Yeah, and I like that fact that you can make your investors work quite hard for you in all sorts of ways. So, for example, connecting you up on the hiring front, and to really use them, especially if they have a local network or a local connection to somewhere that's new to you. So, I think that's quite good. Make them work for their share of your company, right? Well, what about you, Sebastian? What would you what do you hire slowly, deliberately?
Yeah, I guess I think there's a lot you can put in place to manage these times easier. I think externally, well, let's start internally. What we've done is actually at the start of every year we design a strategy white paper that outlines exactly what we want to achieve and how it connects to our grand vision. And those top line objectives is what everyone else is able to build their objectives for the quarter, even the week or the day on. And I think it's really important to have that guideline, and it's accessible to everyone. We discuss it as a team. We agree on it as a team, and then we sort of follow that. And it really serves as a lighthouse to kind of guide us through the storm. And I think externally, as you're facing investors, I mentioned earlier that I've started just proactively asking investors what they're expecting, and I've started to perform a due diligence on us. And, just try to zoom out and be as self-critical as you like. And, are we actually able to answer all these questions properly? Have we actually thought about this? Do we actually have data to back up this decision? Can we actually explain why we ended up here in Germany as opposed to France or Portugal or elsewhere in the world? So these are, I think they're really important questions, and you can do a lot of work without, even confronting anyone, just by really testing yourself and being honest to yourself. And on a micro level, I guess, with people that we hire, but also internally, I think my most important takeaway from the situation that we're in is just try to sort of use as little buzzwords as possible and try to be as clear and concise and genuine as you can. Show up as an authentic person, be transparent and clear about what you're trying to communicate, and don't leave any space for people to guess or to try to read your mind. Just be genuine and don't hide between big words and complex narratives.
Yeah. And Jan, any thoughts from you in terms of what are top tips?
I want to thank Sebastian first. And so my invitation is two things. The first is to thank everyone for saying things like this. The second is to be altruistic and generous. So think about the other. The other also is suffering from this COVID, the one you hire, or the person hiring you, or the office manager, or, people are really in deep emotional stress since 1 year. So think about them and, welcome their emotions and, be a supporter and someone who's listening and giving some help if requested. The second thing is a very easy one, as everyone who's been recruited through us during the last year received some gifts at certain moments of their onboarding. The day they started, received something at home. 1 month afterwards, so we were like celebrating virtually things that we were not able to do in person. So if you think about people and if you are generous, altruistic, then I think you are in a situation where when you will meet again, they will be very grateful about this. I think every attention you give to others today will be maximized in terms of building a good relationship. So pay attention to others.
Yeah, I think that sounds like good advice for life in general. And I'm afraid we're slightly running over even our time that we had. So I'm going to have to say, a big thank you to Sebastian, Leonardo, and Jan, and a goodbye to you three. But then I think Thomas is going to join us for a few moments just to talk about kind of the Paris region specifically. And I've seen that there's a couple of questions that have come in about, setting up a legal entity and accessing support tools. And I actually think this is a very good moment, because I think those are things that Thomas can speak to quite well, at least for the French situation. So anyway, but a really big thank you to the panel. It's been great sharing those insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Great meeting you.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
And Thomas, are you there with us now? I am not sure whether we do have Thomas.
I'm afraid he's not there yet.
Okay, we could have kept
But
going for a little longer. Well, do you
Finally
know?
managed to finish stage. Thank you for
Excellent.
waiting.
Yes, I think maybe it was the number of people that we had on stage. Sometimes there are limits, aren't there, of how many we can have. But no, fantastic to have you here, Thomas, because we had a couple of really technical questions that have come in, and I wondered whether we might address those straight away. I mean, here's one that I know that you would love to answer, which is, what are the 3 reasons why someone should choose Paris region? This is your specialist subject, so.
Yes, why choose Paris region? Excellent question, of course, but in only 3 reasons I would summarize it, because we are talking mainly to deep tech companies, and because talent is the key resource. Pay attention to this, and pay attention to the availability of top talents available in the Paris region, and I would say at a super competitive cost, because of the exceptional support from the government and the region, and especially thanks to this excellent tax relief, the R&D tax credit available for any company doing research. So having a PhD is really cost effective in France, as they have great training and low cost. So that would be talent. Second one would be in a region like Paris region, it's the proximity of the different stakeholders, and maybe the proximity, especially for business, to the decision centers of 28 Fortune 500 companies, where you can really expect to reach your customers and sell this disruptive solution that you're developing. And the third, quality of life. It's impressive how in normal conditions we have everything at reach: Greenlands, culture, and food.
Yep, no, those are definitely advantages. And I wanted to pick up on one of those specifically, which was about the sort of the support really for deep tech companies. I mean, you touched on one of them, which is sort of tax relief that you can get. I mean, is that something that you find when you talk to deep tech companies? Are they kind of really evaluating sort of what they can get in Paris versus what they might be able to get in, I don't know, Berlin or London or Madrid? And have you kind of structured it to be very competitive to those other places?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a bit of figures to illustrate it. Let's start with a comparison with the extreme. The extreme is in the US, but it is half the cost in France than in the US to hire a research staff. So just think about it as an impressive incentive for your business plan. And on top of this, yes, you have this. It is thanks to research tax credit, and research tax credit exists for 30 years. So it's really something that is part of the cultural playground in France, and especially in the Paris region, where we concentrate a lot of research.
Mm-hmm. But there's been this kind of special focus, I think, on a lot of the deep tech areas. So, for example, there was the sort of quantum strategy, which was, unveiled. There's been a lot of interest in areas like hydrogen, or also with the kind of, urban aviation and these areas. I mean, again, do you think, is that bringing in sort of extra resources, pots of money or help, or something else which deep tech companies should kind of be aware of?
In fact, we are part of the different organizations available in the Paris region to help deep tech companies make their solution more visible to so we organized 3 open innovation calls in partnership with large corporations that wanted to have the best of the global disruptors. And they, yes, as you said, one was for hydrogen, how to use it for aircrafts. Another one was the future of air mobility, and especially UAVs for moving people from the city centers to airports. And this was made to raise awareness on these so many different solutions in the world. So we attracted hundreds of expression of interest through these different open innovation calls, and it's really ongoing. We still build the relationship with the different participants.
And do you think as a result of that, some of them will then build a presence in Paris, maybe where they weren't thinking about Paris otherwise, but because you're able to maybe put them together with a partner in the region, it suddenly becomes a good prospect for them to internationalize?
Do you mean, is it an advantage to be present in person?
Yeah. I guess it's just that the work that you do, like these open calls for innovation, whether it's actually, maybe it's making some startups really think about Paris, where maybe that wasn't sort of in their plan, but because you've been so active in sort of helping them find perhaps a business partner and so on.
There are initiatives that raised awareness on the exceptional ecosystem we have for years now, and I think about Station F, the French Tech. These are places, initiatives that are known worldwide, and that have that shows this really booming this momentum of the tech ecosystem. So I think it's just an additional operational way to welcome these newcomers, and to once again create as much connections with the ecosystem, especially the large corporation, as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking that there are lots of one example that I think is really fun for Paris at the moment is for example, you're going to have Volocopter. If we're talking about the sort of urban aviation market, it's going to be one of the first places in Europe where you're going to be seeing, hopefully real passenger services launched in time for the Olympics, which makes it a big stage for them to kind of demonstrate what they can do. But I mean, was that a really conscious, I don't know, how much you were involved in that particular, but I just wondered whether there was a conscious thinking about making Paris feel like it was a really friendly city, open to the idea of urban aviation.
It's a good question. Volocopter, as a foreign company, had to get in touch with the institutions, because any deep tech, and especially flying vehicles, have many restrictions in terms of regulation and so on, and it's the case for most of the deep tech. So we acted as an intermediary between the Volocopter and the institutions to work efficiently on tackle all these regulation issues. It's the same for many different other deep tech businesses. We talk a lot about IPs, about standards, and our team at Choose Paris region is able to handle this kind of question. We are not IP experts, but we have engineers, PhDs, working in our team to find the real solution and accelerate your growth and your access to the market.
So people can really come to you if they, again, if they don't really know how I don't know, all of those kind of questions that you have in the very beginning. How do I even incorporate as a company here? How do I protect my IP? What do I do about? I think one of the things that people stress about is French employment law is one of the things.
Excellent. Yes, if you have any question, and it's really the everyday job for us to handle this cliche and to have to give something clear and transparent about the situation. Of course, the law in France is sometimes considered as difficult to understand. We are here to say what is important for you, who are the experts that will do the job for you and make your company ready, up and running for doing business, whatever the regulation is. So we try to do this as smoothly as possible. And there are every day many difficulties, but we support more than 1,000 companies every year, and our team is great for that. So we know, I guess, most of the situations.
Yeah, and that's a lot of companies every year, 1,000. What's the trend? Is it going? Are you seeing more inquiries, and how's it gone in this pandemic year?
We were surprised that the number of foreign investments in 2020 was quite high, and especially in terms of number of jobs created. So it's something we consider a good sign of confidence in the economy of our region. This is, of course, because we had this huge digitalization of the economy, offering many opportunities, but not only. We'll see how it is, how it will be in the next months.
Right. I may have.
Maija, we have lost connections. So. I guess we have other questions maybe to answer.
Hello, Thomas.
Sorry, I'm back. So that sort of dropped out. I wonder whether it was. I mean, I guess we've gone through. I'm just wondering whether there were any remaining questions, or whether is that a good place to stop, because we are at the really at the end of our time. But I think it was. I don't know. I think there was kind of a lot of really interesting new information for me there in terms of just the way that startups have been thinking about not just kind of accelerating despite COVID, but actually using it as a kind of a way to accelerate what they were doing, and then talking through some of those practical strategies. And then at the end, I mean, it's great to hear, Thomas, how much kind of hand-holding that you can actually receive in these places. And I don't know whether startups always know just how much kind of help there is, which, I mean, would help save them a huge amount of time actually in trying to figure out something like this. So
that's the idea. Yes, saving time and get faster into cultural and economical aspects of of our country. That's what we do.
Yeah. But thanks everyone I think we should probably finish there, but I think hopefully it's been helpful and really practical for anybody who's thinking about this. And I think Hello Tomorrow and Choose Paris Region are kind of available for further questions. So if something came up and we didn't answer your question, then do please contact them and follow up. And thanks again to Hello Tomorrow for having me on. I'm Maija Palmer from Sifted. So looking forward to also connecting with you. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn, I'm sure.
Thank you very much, Maija. Thank you, Thomas. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope it was insightful. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a great evening, everyone.